It's the second episode of the Fenway Rundown this week. Chris Cotillo remains off somewhere. I don't even want to know. On time off, taking some vacation, making poor choices for his football fantasy team somewhere. He'll be back next week. Earlier in the week, we had a mailbag edition reading your submissions from the Insider Text program. Today, pleased to have with us my good friend Chris Russo. You know him from Sirius XM and the MLB Network. He'll be up in just a minute. But first, a reminder on that Insider Text program how to join. Simple. Text the word join to 617-751-6257. Then click the link to subscribe. You'll get a free 14-day trial period. And after that, it will be $4.99 per month. As we noted, happy to have my good friend Chris Russo with us on the Fenway Rundown. Second episode this week. Chris Cotillo continues to take some time off. He'll be back next week, but thrilled to have Chris with us today. Chris, how are you?
Hello there, Sean. How's my main man? Things good?
Everything's great here. Coming down the stretch here to the 2024 baseball season and a what looks to be a very disappointing finish for the Red Sox again. This has become an annual tradition around here the last 3 years where the bottom just drops out in August and September. They were in your backyard the last few nights. I know you were busy watching tennis and doing some other things, but what's your take on where the Red Sox sit at this point?
Well, listen, the Mets are hot, and the Mets, won that incredible game in Arizona. Not incredible, but they won a big game in Arizona, the third game of that series after they had lost the Carroll Grand Slam the night before, and they came back and they beat the Diamondbacks. They got a run in the ninth inning, and then they went to go play the White Sox. So, they were a joke. So, they were going to have a little momentum. Then they swept, and then they came in New York, the Reds, to the City Field against a reeling team in the Red Sox, which is a shame because the Royals and Twins have both been terrible. So if the Red Sox had just won a few games, they'd be 2, 3, 4 games out. They'd be right there. Now they're not. The Red Sox have, you see them more than me. Their hitting has been terrible. It looks like Devers hasn't been quite as good. Now they move him up in a lineup. They don't have great pitching anyway. So it's not like if they're not going to win 1-0. Lomborg's not coming to the rescue. So from that standpoint, it becomes a bad situation. You can tell me exactly why they have not been able to win at home. I know they had lost 16 of 25 before these 3 games. So now they've lost, 19 of 28? I mean, geez, they went into Kansas City. They had a good series in Kansas City. And then ever since, they got swept by Houston and they can't do anything. Very, very puzzling. We all loved the Cora signing, manager of the year, Red Sox, 8, 9 games over 500. And now they can't get out of their own way. I think the bigger story probably is the Mets, who, again, were 11 under on, May 30th. And I think they're 54-31 since, which might be one of the best records, if not, in baseball. And, them and the Braves, could be very interesting here late in the season. The Mets play Atlanta in Atlanta. They don't usually play well there. They go there the last week of the year. Mets also have 2 series with the Phillies. And they play the Brewers in Milwaukee that might be playing for something on that last weekend, while the Braves have, outside of L.A., a little easier schedule. But the Mets are quite a story. You got to give Mendoza credit. Lindor's had a great year. But back to your original theme, I mean, you follow him better than me. Red Sox are a mess. Can't hit.
Yeah, can't hit now. Earlier in the season, it was defensive lapses, and then it became pitching. And in August, it was the bullpen. They have their ERA in the bullpen since the All-Star break is over 6, and you can't win games down the stretch. You saw the last 2 nights, 1-run games into the 7th or 8th innings, and then the Mets are tacking on 4 or 5 runs and pulling away, and any hope of a late inning comeback from the Red Sox is gone. Chris? What's the vibe like in New York with with the Yankees certainly heading to the postseason and the Mets with at least a decent chance? Is there
I think
some,
right now,
as you like to say, is there some juice there with the Mets and Yankees?
definitely more so right now with the Mets because they're a surprise. I mean, the Yankees are 40-41 in their last 81 games. They have lost series, Sean, and this is after they've won the first game. They have lost series to Detroit, the Angels, St. Louis, the Nationals, and Texas. Plus, they only went 4-2 against Colorado and the White Sox. I mean, the Yankees have been awful. I mean, so as a result of that, I think there is a little skepticism of where the Yankees can be at the end of the day. Holmes has been bad, as you know. They will play Baltimore that last week of the season, and the Orioles are a mess too. But I think right now, and there's always that Soto thing, and everybody in New York knows that this is going to be tedious with the off season and whether they sign him or don't sign him. Boris will wait until March. That's nobody's looking forward to that. But the Mets are a surprise. Lindor's been great. MVP chance, of course, at Citi Field. Manaea, who would have thought? Dave Peterson's 9-1. Who would have thought? Diaz had a great outing after he gave up the home run to Carroll in Arizona. Ninth inning, he was unhittable. They feel a little better about him. I still think the Met fan is a little cautious of not getting too optimistic because the Mets have a history of letting down their fandom when they get to a situation where you get a lot of hope up. But I think right now there's a little bit more curiosity per se. And again, when a team is better than you think and it's a surprise and it's early September, that is always going to be more interesting than a team that has sort of been up and down. They have a huge payroll. They should have put this division away a long time ago. So I think there's probably a little bit more juice for the Mets than it is the Yankees. Now, listen, it's interesting. That last week in September, the Orioles played the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. That's during the week. The Mets are in Atlanta during the week, and the Giants are playing Dallas on Thursday night. So that will be
It's a
a
big
big
week.
week in New York sports. And obviously, the two teams, the Yankees are going to need that series against the Orioles to win the division. And the Mets, remember about the Mets, season series wise, it's tight with that tiebreak. So those 3 games in Atlanta will go a long way, maybe if they finish tied, to see who gets to post the last spot in the postseason.
Yeah, I don't know what is more surprising, the fact that Atlanta could miss the playoffs or that the Mets could make them, given where
Yeah.
things stood just a few months ago.
Well,
Let's talk about the Yankees, who are a mess in the late innings with their bullpen situation. Clay Holmes has 11 blown saves. That's a lot. I mean, you
right.
go into a year figuring there's going to be 3, 4, maybe 5 times where your guy gives it up. Law of averages, you overcome that. 11 is a big number as we get into early September. And now Boone is kind of talking about bullpen by committee, and he's going to make decisions on who closes out based on matchups. How big a worry is that for the Yankees with the postseason less than 4 weeks away?
Absolutely. And the guy who's going to hear about it is Cashman. Tanner Scott and Adam went to San Diego. The Orioles didn't really amplify their bullpen, improve it, nor did the Yankees. And I think everybody knew at the deadline that the Yankees needed to do something in the bullpen. Now, Chisholm's been great. So from that standpoint, the Yankees made that good move getting Chisholm. They're starting pitching, Rondon, you never know what you're getting, but the upside is very good. Cole's Cole. They'll figure out that third starter, whether it's Cortez, Stroman, Clark Schmidt, Heel. I think a lot of people think they might put Heel in the bullpen.
Hmm.
Let it know. He walks a lot of guys, but he's got swing and miss stuff. And obviously, as a result of that, you don't have to worry about the bloop single in the left field to lose a big game. He's going to start Friday in Chicago, and Cortez is going to sort of back up both he and Schmidt the first 2 games of that series. Cole's pitching Sunday night. So I think Heel would be a possibility. I do think he will be a possibility. I want to leave it in Boone's hands to make, these big game time decisions that determine seasons. I wouldn't want to do that if I was, Cashman. Boone's not been great strategy-wise in his days as a Yankee manager in October, but that's where it might come down to. He might have to make a call. But I do think they might give Heel a shot. Now, he does walk people. He puts a lot of guys on base. So that would worry me a little bit, but he does have hit and miss stuff, Sean, as you know. I think Holmes, good guy, handles the media great. He gives up a lot of these cheap hits, so it's not all his fault, but he doesn't strike out a lot of guys. And as you said, 11 blown saves is 11 blown saves. But the one thing I would say, outside of Class A, all these teams have bullpen issues.
Yeah,
Who are the
Baltimore
Orioles
too.
going to use to get 3? Who are the Orioles going to use to get 3 outs? Kansas City, no. Minnesota's got some options, but I don't necessarily believe in Duran and those guys either. Hader's given up 9 home runs, and the Yankees kill him. And Hader was bad against Atlanta when they were in the postseason 3 years ago. I know the Dodgers don't know, what Kopech, Evan Phillips, who's their closer. And do you trust Estevez? I mean, he's never pitched a big game in his life with the season on the line. So outside of Cleveland, all these teams might have a situation where they can lose a postseason game because they can't get 3 outs in the ninth inning.
Yeah, and as dominating as Clase has been in Cleveland, he's got more than a handful of blown saves too. I mean, his stuff is off the charts. His numbers look great, but a few have gotten away from him. Let's go back to the Yankees for a minute. Does Aaron Boone need a deep run here to come back? Deep run in October.
That's a very interesting question. I would have said he would have been in trouble if the Yankees had a season like last year, where they were 82 and 80. Steinbrenner loves him. Cashman loves him. If you read the Andy Martino book, I mean, Cashman thinks he's got Terry Francona as his manager, which is ridiculous. I think Boone and Judge loves him, which is important. I think Boone will probably survive no matter what. I mean, if he lost 2 games to Minnesota and the Yankees got knocked out in the wild card round, I guess all bets are off. But I think that the last thing the Yankees want to do is fire Boone. So unless it's just an absolute mess, which it would have been if they didn't make the playoffs, I think they're going to swallow hard and figure out a way to bring him back. The Yankee fan doesn't necessarily want that, but I think that Hal and Cashman do, and they'll probably win out at the end of the day. He's got an option for next year. They can just pick up the option. I mean, maybe they give him a 1-year contract so he's not a lame duck, and we're not dealing with this every single 5-game losing streak in 25. Your guess is, the baseball guys better than me. Your guess probably as good as better than mine. I would think they would bring Boone back for 2025, based on the idea they're going to be in the playoffs anyway.
Right. And what about the Juan Soto chase? Does he come back to the Bronx? And do we see the first Steinbrenner versus Cohen free agent battle over this guy this winter? There's been some suggestion in some circles that Cohen doesn't want to upset the apple cart, that he knows that Steinbrenner supported him when he was buying the team, that he doesn't want to rankle the Yankees by going after their guy. Any truth to that? How does that play out?
The Soto their guy thing is it's not like it's Judge. He's there 1 year. So
right.
It's a little more open with Soto. I think the Mets might make a move at Corbin Burns. To amplify their pitching. They have the Alonso deal. They got to figure out what they're going to do with him because he's a free agent. My guess right now would be they never want to tell the Players Association, but my guess right now is that Cohen might pass on Soto. That's my guess. Nobody tells me anything. I think the Mets have had a really good year without Soto. Marte's still got a year left in his contract. I think they would lay low with it and not get into that scenario. And I think at the end of the day, Hal probably realizes he's got to keep him. He's been great. I mean, he's a terrible outfielder. He's not Al Kaline in right field. He's terrible. But I would think that Hal knows he's got to probably keep him. So I think probably it would take forever. I know the Cubs and maybe your team, the Giants. But if you're Soto, why go to the Cubs Giants? I mean, the Yankees are going to give you a chance every year to be in the postseason. The ballpark suits him. The fans like him. He's got Judge there to take some pressure off him. I think probably at the end of the day, he'll be a Yankee. Sure. And I think you probably feel that way too, right?
I do. I think that given what they pushed all the chips to the middle of the table to make that trade a 1-year deal, knowing there's no guarantee, particularly as a Boris guy. Boris is always going to go to the market and let everybody bid, so they have no inherent built-in advantage having had him for a year. And yet I think they realize it's kind of in for a dime, in for a dollar at this point, and they've got to keep him in part to justify giving up all the talent they traded to San Diego to get him for this 1 year.
Well, the other thing is, Sean, when's the last time the Yankees lost a free agent who was on their team that they wanted?
Right.
Maybe Robinson Cano. I mean, you want to argue that? I think they wanted him. They didn't think he was worth $240 million, and they were right about that.
Yeah, they made the right call there, given what happened.
And then they got Ellsbury, which was a bad decision because they wanted to throw the Yankee fan a bone, and Ellsbury was terrible here. They were probably looking at that Damon thing, and maybe they could, hit lightning in a bottle twice. But I think that I mean, I don't know this. Howe doesn't talk to anybody. I think everybody is a little, and everybody knows that Boris, but the Yankees have a lot of Boris clients. I mean, let's face it, Cole's a Boris client. So I don't know if that is going to scare them off. They can backload the contract with the age. So, it's not like they got to pay him. They can give him the same they give Judge for the next 6 years and then give him another 50 million after that for 6 years. I think I just don't think the Yankees can afford to lose him. And then look at it this way. If the Yankees win a World Championship, you got to keep him. And if the Yankees lose badly to somebody, you're gonna double down on that and lose Soto. So in other words, you lose to the Orioles in a divisional series, and then on top of that, 3 months later, Soto goes to the Red Sox or goes to the Mets. Even let's say I'm wrong with Cohen, goes to the Giants or the Cubs. That's a double. That's a double whammy.
Right.
So I think at the end of the day, he'll probably be a Yankee. Now it's going to be tedious, and you're probably going to have to wait until March.
Right. Which we're accustomed to doing for all big free agents now.
Yes.
Nobody signs on time. Where do you stand on the AL and NL MVP choices? Seems fairly clear cut in both leagues. Are you of
Well, I
the
think Judge. I
belief
think
that,
no, Judge has not done anything in the last 9 days. But I think you got to give it to Judge. I know Bobby Witt's had a great year, but I would give it to Judge. I think it's a little more interesting in the NL, Lindor and Ohtani. Now Ohtani's going to get it because the writers, as you know, are going to vote for him, and but Lindor is playing shortstop. He's which he posts every day. He's had a great year. The Mets make the playoffs. That could be a little interesting. Ohtani's got Betts and Freeman there around him. Now, listen, Betts missed 6 weeks, but he's got Betts and Freeman around him, which offers protection. Nemo and Alonso don't offer that same kind of protection to
right?
Lindor. I think you can make an argument and a pretty good one. Shortstop, make the postseason. He's had a great year to give it to Lindor, but the writer's pension better than me. I do think Ohtani at the end, 50-50. They love Ohtani. First year in a new city. Dodgers maybe the best record. I do think at the end of the day, the Dodgers will get him.
Yeah, I would be otherwise inclined to not support a DH because there are no contributions in the field, but we're witnessing a historic offensive season with a guy who, as you said, is likely to have 50 homers and 50 stolen bases. No one has come close to that before. And so I think that while Lindor will get some support, it may not be unanimous. I think Ohtani wins. I think it's also a case in the American League where Judge will beat Witt, despite the argument that you could make that Witt has been more of a contributor on both sides of the ball. Judge has not played great defense. He's not a great center fielder. The defensive metrics have him in the way down among all other American League center fielders, while Witt steals bases, plays great defense, and is going to have well over 200 hits with some power. This we can go back and forth all day, but I think Judge's the potential for Judge to have another 60 home run season on a team that's going to the playoffs is probably going to be tough to overcome.
I think so. I remember, I think the Judge. I know the center field thing is interesting, but he's not a center. He's a right fielder, but he's moved to center field to
Right.
help Soto, who's a terrible outfielder, and to let Stanton, who they thought maybe beginning of the year would play a little left, plus Verdugo out there. Dominguez, if he plays out there, the kid coming up. So I think he's actually, taking one for the team by playing center field. So I don't get as worried about the defensive metrics based on that because, I understand he's probably better off in right, but you can't put him in right because you got Soto there. I think Judge will get it. I also think it's hard to win an MVP when it's your first kind of MVP year.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's an apprenticeship to that award where you
I
almost
agree.
got to be in the mix for a couple of years before they finally give you one. That's the way I look at it.
Right, and it probably doesn't help that he's playing in a market like Kansas City that
Right.
That doesn't get anywhere near the sort of media attention. We're going through another year here where there's a third wild card in both teams. It was designed to keep things interesting in September, in part because baseball's going head to head with the start of the NFL and college football. They want to be have more teams in play, keep and retain fans' interest. What's your sense of where the sport stands as it goes into the final month and the interest level? You do a daily talk show from on Sirius XM. You get callers from all across the country. Are people energized by any of these races, or are we looking at a bunch of mediocre 500 teams looking to get in for 3 games and then they're done?
Well, here's listen. You and I would like to go back to 1969 or 68 if we could, but if the NFL can put 14 teams in the playoffs, they have 32. Why can't baseball put 12 out of 30? That's the first thing I'd say. Now, I know the argument against that is, well, the NFL, it's only 17 games. It's not a 6-month season. Baseball, they play 162 games to do what? I think the thing that hurts baseball a little bit with the wild card is the postseason is so unpredictable. We saw Arizona, we saw obviously Texas. They were a
Philadelphia
wild
two
card
years
team,
ago.
the Phillies, that they could have the great regular season team flame out while in football, the 2 seed, remember the 1 seed gets a bye. The 2 seed that might go 13-4 is not going to lose to the 9-8 team when they get home field advantage.
Right.
So as a result, they don't have these teams that are 500 or a little above make a mockery of the regular season by, getting hot in January and going to the Super Bowl. Now, it's happened, Eli Manning, but generally speaking, you got to be a pretty good team, and home field is significant, generally speaking. I know Mahomes last year, but, the Chiefs won a division.
Right.
Baseball doesn't have that advantage because, as in a best-of-3 series or a best-of-5 series, it doesn't make any difference. Look at last year. You had 3 teams win 100 games and 3 teams won 100 games last year. You know this, and only one team won a game in a divisional round.
Right.
So, listen, I like the wild card round once I get there. I do think the argument can be made that when you play 6 months and you play that many games, you shouldn't give all these teams a chance with 82 wins to have a good 10 days. And it basically, compensates for 5 months of bad baseball. But, the Mets in 73 didn't do anything, and they won 82 games, 82 and 79, and they won a world championship. They came within game 7. The Cardinals of 06, they were a bad team. They won a World Series. So, there are examples of teams that win a division in the old days and still, because it's a bad division, get something going. I understand what baseball is trying to do. Do I think anybody in Kansas City is going to care middle of September? If the Twins are playing the Royals and they're playing for the 5th or the 6th spot, no, I don't. I don't think you're going to see an increased attendance for regular season. But if Kansas City makes the playoffs and they go play Houston 2 games and they win and they play in a divisional series, people in Kansas City will get into it. So it's a do or your die. It's a do or your die situation. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right.
If you're the sport, you can make an argument. You can make it a little harder for the wild card. You can dilly-dally with the format, make them play a 1-game playoff on Friday and then go play, the Costas scenario. He's got a million of these proposals. You can make it harder. The thing that I would like to see him do, Sean, I like to reseed. I think the idea that protects the idea that you might have 2 great teams in the same division with the best records, and then you got to play them in the best of 5. Last year the Braves beat the Phillies by 14 games. And then they had the first playoff series was the Phillies again.
Right.
They just beat the Phillies. They got to beat them again.
Yep.
So I would argue that I don't think the format in the postseason is great, but you're asking for a bigger picture. Do you like wild card or not? I probably would lean to I would, but I understand the pratfalls, and I'm sure you do too. I'm sure there's things you don't like about it either.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's not perfect, but I think it's you have to be too much of a purist to think that there can't be these many wild card teams to maintain some interest and expand the field and provide more TV content for October, which is a big part of this. Quickly, Chris, first weekend of the NFL season, for reasons I can't quite figure out, you are a big believer in the New York Jets. You have been singing their praises. What is your Super Bowl pick and why are you so all in on the New York Jets?
Yeah, a good question. I'm going to pick. I haven't given you a pick yet. I think the Lions are a little too trendy. I'll go off them. So I'll pick the Eagles in the NFC, and I'll go Buffalo in the AFC. I'll do a Philly Buffalo thing. The reason why I am up on the Jets, there's a few reasons. First off, I believe in karma. You know that better than anybody since you know me well. And I think the Jets are due for some luck. Last year was very
Decades
unlucky.
ago.
They're due for a little break. I mean, they
Yep.
lost Rodgers after four plays. They haven't been in the playoffs since 2010. So I think they're due for some success. That's number one. Number two, I know Rodgers was not great 2 years ago, but he's got a little chip on his shoulder. He doesn't have to be great with this team because they got a very good defense, whether Reddick signs there or not. So I think as a result there, I'm going to think that he'd be healthy and he'd do. They won 7 games last year with Tim Boyle and Zach Wilson. So if he's healthy, I can't find 3 or 4 more wins that they can get in the course of the year. And remember, they'll have a tough first game. Their next 3 games are at Tennessee, the Patriots at home, and Denver at home. I mean, they could easily be 3-1 with a little mojo. So again, I'm banking on Rodgers. They have a good defense. They can run the ball. They got a relatively easy schedule, 5th easiest in the league, and they have um, they're due for some luck as a franchise. So as a result, and I can't believe the number is so low. The Jets are 9.5. I'm really surprised it's that low. They can't win 10 games with this team. With that defense, I mean, they got a great corner. They got a good pass rush. They got a great wide receiver. They got a good running back in Hall. And they got a Hall of Fame quarterback, albeit 40, he's a Hall of Famer. You can't win 10 games. So that's why I took them. Maybe I'm going a little overboard by thinking they could go as far as I thought they can go. And yesterday I picked them in the AFC Championship game. But I think the Jets are going to have a good year. Now, you don't think so? You think the Jets are going to have a good
No,
year?
I think the Jets will ultimately be the Jets and succumb. I'm not quite the believer in karma. I'm more a believer in history, and something always goes wrong with the Jets. I think you could make the argument that they are the worst franchise in professional sports over the last 50 years, given where they are and given how poorly they've performed. But we'll have to discuss that at another point. Chris, always great talking to you. You hear him every day on Sirius XM, Channel 82, Mad Dog Sports. You see him on MLB Network and High Heat. It's a pleasure to always have you on, Chris. Good talking to you. Thanks for being with us.
Nobody loves you more than me, Sean. Well done. Anytime for you. Anytime.
Thanks, Chris. My thanks again to Chris Russo joining us on the Fenway Rundown in our second episode this week, taking you into the weekend. He had some thoughts on the start of the NFL season and lots of baseball thoughts. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you also, too, will enjoy the Red Sox Insider Text program. Very easy to join. Text the word join to 617-751-6257. Then click the link to subscribe. You get a free 14-day trial period. After that, there's a $4.99 per month charge.